I want to take a look at this Screenrant article today, which is, it's official, Marvel's Spider-Man is an old man. I will start by saying, please do not contact the author. Don't reach out to them in any way. That is not the point to slam the author, but it's to take a look at the work. This is something that sort of struck me the wrong way, and it's for a few reasons. I've said it in the past. I don't think there's anything wrong with a salacious thumbnail, and by salacious, I mean trying to get someone to click, whether that's, I should add title to that as well. Whether that's a thumbnail that's saying like my Call of Duty one, you are being scammed. That's actually how I feel. And that's the difference. Now, is it played up and salacious in order to try to get people's attention? Absolutely. That's what you have to do on the internet these days. That's the game. That is what you do if you want someone to see the content you make. And believe me, nobody out here is making content so that no one looks at it. Same with articles. This is here so that we will see it. But I hate clickbait when it's dishonest. And I really don't feel like this is a very honest take on this character. And I think that they're trying to walk a line between saying that this is the company saying this, Marvel, and that this is them. But as we get into this article here, basically what happened, and there will be some spoilers for Outlawed, and also they point out some of the Spider-Man stuff like Ghost Spider going on with Spider-Gwen. There are some spoilers here for that. But essentially what's going on right now in Marvel Comics is there is this law. And to break it down like as simply as possible, if you remember the Superhuman Registration Act from the original Civil War, it is sort of like that, but it applies to underage superheroes. And more specifically, superheroes under the age of 21. So you could argue that they are legal adults, which they are in universe. But it's the same sort of idea as if you're under 21, you're not allowed to drink alcohol. It's that same sort of idea. Now, there are discrepancies with that in the real world. A lot of people will point out things like, why can't I drink alcohol, but I can go and die for my country? People will point things out like that. And there is not a standard by which these things are decided. It's sort of, how would you say it? Each law applies to a different topic, I would say. And that's sort of the same with this cradle law, which is CRADLE, which is clever. Good job, Marvel. That's much more clever than Snowflake and Safe Space, which, by the way, is a real thing. But essentially what's going on here is that Peter Parker has sided with the older superheroes, or at least with the government, in terms of the law. Spider-Man is abiding the law once again, siding against the young heroes, which is something that hasn't been fully established yet, but in Ghost Spider number 8, and this is as written by the author, Gwen Stacy of Earth 65, Spider-Gwen obviously, or Ghost Spider, is universe hopping, jumping between her home universe and Earth 616. So basically she's going back and forth, and Peter Parker knows her identity. There's a lot of weird things going on here, like the class thinks that he's dating her, which is a weird... a really weird like angle for them to go with in this comic, and it does fall under Marvel's weird direction lately, which I'll also get into in this. But essentially what they get into here is that Gwen starts sort of like poking fun at Peter's age, which I guess now they're trying to play into the idea that Peter is older, which to me is ironic because Dan Slott and a lot of the Marvel writing team really did seem to try and go in on this idea that Peter Parker needs to be seen as this young, hip superhero, that he can't be married to Mary Jane for that reason, and that he needs to stay relevant to the kids. Now I guess they're pivoting on that. They're trying to go backwards on that and establish something with their older readers by making him an old man or like an established hero. Probably because they see that that's what people want. I mean, we were happy with teenage Peter Parker in a lot of areas. I mean, it's nice to see him in the MCU, and it's also was very nice to see him in the Ultimate Spider-Man comic run, not the horrendous show, in my opinion. Sorry if you like it. I'm not a fan. But basically what they're going down now is this path where Peter Parker is not on the side of teenagers, I guess. Interesting take, I suppose. And Miss Marvel was actually injured in this fight. I'm TLDRing it as much as possible for you here without you reading the comic. And when Gwen asks if she'll be all right, Peter says he doesn't know, and that he's not involved enough with the young heroes to know. And then he sort of goes on to explain this whole vigilantism cradle law about no one under 21 being an independent superhero. And essentially we're at this point where Peter could sponsor Spider-Gwen, which would definitely be her way out. Ghost Spider, Spider-Gwen, whatever you want to call her now. I know they've been trying to change, and actually make the Ghost Spider thing stick. But basically, Spider-Gwen is against that. And then it sort of goes on in the article to talk about how Gwen's not impressed because Peter began his career as Spider-Man when he was in high school. Now, there's a few things that I think about this, by the way, because the writing in this comic is actually an interesting direction. It is true that Peter Parker did technically begin when he was in high school. He was still a teenager. He's a little older than he was in something like the Marvel Universe, the Marvel Ultimate Universe, but he still was a teenager. So that's true. So does this make Spider-Man a hypocrite? That's sort of what it seems like Marvel's trying to lean into here for me, and I don't necessarily think so. I do want to add that one thing I think makes this old man argument really not genuine, both on the part of Marvel itself and the writer, if they believe that, is the fact that this is not a fully agreed upon topic either in the real world. I mean, the idea here is essentially that if they're 18, right, if someone is 18 and they can fight in the military, why are they not able to be a vigilante or a superhero or whatever? But also, again, like I pointed out, you have these laws in real life, like having to be 21 to drink, but being able to be 18 and go into the military. Now, while I don't want to take like an anti-military or even a super pro-military stance on the channel because it's just not about that, I think it's worth pointing out that these are not agreed upon topics. Just because there is an age limit set currently in the real world doesn't mean that everyone agrees with those age limits. A lot of people think that, hey, if the drinking age is this, then the military age should be raised to that because a lot of kids are being recruited right out of high school with very few future prospects and sort of going into the first thing that they see any kind of future in. That is a legitimate argument a lot of people have made against young military recruitment. And I would assume that because the Marvel world reflects our own in many ways, that would be an argument brought up there as well. At the same time, you also obviously have the idea here that these superheroes, a lot of whom are teenagers, whether that's under 18 or over 18 and less than 21, have often gone through some traumatic events. These are not, I don't want to say they're damaged people, because I think that damaged people is often a very misused terminology that sort of implies that people can't be fixed. They've gone through some traumatic thing and they can never get over it. But a lot of these teenagers or even young adults have gone through some pretty traumatic stuff. And they're trying to find a way to better their community and fit in where they can and make the world a better place. So they jump into vigilantism, using the powers that they've been given at an early age when their brains still have not fully developed yet, being before the age of 21, in order to take on those risks. And you can even see back in the past of Peter Parker's superhero days when he was young, he made a lot of mistakes. I mean, he continues to make a lot of mistakes to this day into his late 20s, almost pushing 30 now in universe. But he made a lot of mistakes from being young. A lot of mistakes that could have gotten him or others around him killed, and sometimes did, like trying to save Gwen Stacy from falling off, the bridge that Goblin threw her off, trying to catch her with webbing and just snapping her neck inadvertently. His mistakes from his youth and his inexperience did sometimes get people killed. And sort of Peter is taking this stance that, hey, maybe you need to gain more experience, maybe you need to be older and wiser to be able to take on this life or death situation. I don't think that makes him an old man. I don't think that makes Spider-Man a boomer. I don't think this makes him out of touch with youth. If anything, he's older, wiser, and is actually looking out for those that should be under his stead or under his wing. He's trying to take Gwen under his wing in this way, and she is just pissed off about it. And I completely understand that too. I mean, if you've been under a certain age where there is a limitation to what you can do, maybe you're 14 years old and 10 months, you're like, why can't I have my driver's permit that's for 15? What does that extra 2 months do? That is a valid argument, but the cutoff has to be somewhere. And for Spider-Man to think, well, maybe this might be a reasonable cutoff, and just say this is the cutoff, does not make him some kind of ancient fossil. It just doesn't. And for Marvel to push that possible angle, or for any article authors or anybody to believe that, it's always hard to tell what they believe from these, or if it's just written to get it out there. It just seems very not genuine to me, and like something that doesn't make much sense logically at all, especially because the realism of our world influencing theirs would mean that our issues would also be brought up there in some different ways. You have had some authority figure in your life at some point tell you, I made this mistake before and I don't want you to make the same mistake as me. This is sort of the same direction we saw things go in the MCU with Iron Man and Peter Parker. We saw Tony Stark sort of reach out to Peter Parker and try to shield him from some of the mistakes that Tony made over the course of his life and make him a better person. This seems to me what Spider-Man is trying to do. That seems pretty self-evident, and I think that maybe part of that is I'm also 25 years old. You know, I'm at the age where I could have kids if I wanted to. I have not, because I'm married to my job currently. But that's sort of how I see it. You know, this is a parental figure trying to tell someone, hey, listen, I've made these mistakes. This is what the law is going to be. I can stick my neck out for you and protect you, but here's why it is the way it is. And she sort of throws it back in his face like, well, you did this. And so essentially, she doesn't get why no one's standing up to this idea. And Peter is not endorsing the law, but he's saying that this is what it is. That's what he's saying. And he's not saying that he's going to fight it. So what they're trying to say now, this is where we get into my disingenuous part of the article, other than just the title. Basically, he's trying to protect her as he sees her being a hero as breaking the law. This is the nail in the coffin, showing Peter is officially no longer considered a young hero. Spider-Man has joined the ranks of the adults, like Iron Man and Captain America, which I'd argue that happened a long time ago. This is not something that is new. Peter Parker, despite the pushback from different writers like Slott, who, by the way, I love Superior Spider-Man, so I have no hate for that guy, even if I dislike some of his directions. But people like Slott and other Marvel writers have tried to push him backwards a little bit, but they always kept it enough that he was this older adult as well. He sort of straddled the line between established adult and teenage superhero, even though he was in his 20s. And so essentially, Peter said that, they sort of go on to repeat that Peter said that he's removed from the young circles of the Marvel Universe. So will he switch sides again or not, like in Civil War? Is he stuck in his ways and believes he knows what's best? Let's hope that with age comes wisdom, and he supports Gwen and the young heroes as they are hunted in the Outlawed series. This is sort of a silly take to me. With age comes wisdom. There is such a thing, too, as a law that is actually for the protection of others. I mean, we do have things like not drinking before you're 21, like I said, because there's actual research behind it that the human brain is not done developing before that age. So it does make sense that we would have that law. And likewise, it does make sense in this universe that a law like this would exist, whether people agree with it or not. You have to think about what these kids or young adults or whatever you want to call them, because they are 18. They are legal adults, straight on the line. What are they up against? You go up against some moron like Shocker, right? But you send a younger hero up against someone like this, and there's no problem. There is, though, a risk that comes as you escalate the threat. Would you send a kid up against Shocker? Sure, maybe. Would you send a kid up against an armed robber? Depends how powerful they are. Probably, if they're a superhuman. Would you send a kid up against Carnage? This is someone who would tear you apart and eat you for a joke. What's the line? And that's sort of the question in this is it okay for these to essentially be child soldiers? Because that's essentially what the teenage superheroes are, in a way, is child soldiers. It's something that would be considered horrible, basically, in any other setting. I mean, if the military started drafting 15-year-olds to go fight in a war and be shot at, people would be like, that's barbaric, that's insane. But there are superheroes who are not 18 even, that are also involved in this sort of thing. I mean, there are established Marvel superheroes under the age of 18. Those would be, by definition, child soldiers. So what's Peter Parker supposed to do? I guess that's sort of the question I wanted to pose and leave with you, is what what extent you take this to. What do you think about this direction for Marvel Comics? I would love to make more videos like this in the future, definitely about more article takes like this, and also comic books themselves. As I set up this office, I do plan to have a real camera. They're very expensive, so I'm saving up a little bit of money to actually get that. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Have you been keeping up with Marvel or not? What do you think about their direction with some of these recent comics and creations, especially things like the whole Snowflake and Safe Space thing that I mentioned? I didn't go into detail in a video, but in a live stream, it's absolutely insane to me. Let me know what you're thinking. I'll see you in the next one, and have a fantastic day, guys. Stay awesome. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Check out the Discord, Instagram, Twitter, Patreon. I appreciate all of you. Have a good night.